Welcome to week 3 of Intro Psych. We are going to be covering chapter 2 this week, which is biological psychology. So just like you saw last week, I have a to-do list for you. Please pay attention to all these dates and times as they're very important. You don't want to miss any material and be late. But I've given you a basic to-do list. And then of course, just like I did last week, I give you your objectives for the chapter. Now, again, a couple people asked, what should we be doing with these objectives? They're just there for you to use as a means of studying. So if I were to give a study guide for the chapter, this is what it would look like. In fact, that's what I do with my classes, my in-class classes. Making sure that, as you're working through the chapter and you're reading and you're watching the videos, that before you go to take that test, you can answer each one of these questions, preferably without looking at your notes. That would be a good gauge of understanding whether or not you're getting all the information and there's no holes in terms of one of the biggest questions I always get is, well, what should I be studying? What should I be paying attention to in the lecture slides versus the book? And this pretty much covers all your bases. So one good idea in studying for the test is to take the objectives for this chapter and as well as for chapter 1 and, print this out or put this into a Word document where you can have space in between each objective and you can go ahead and fill in your answers to it. And you can do that, on the computer or you can do that handwritten, but then use that as a guide for studying for the test that's coming up at the end of this week. So as you can tell in this chapter, very, very specific chapter of material, and the language is probably some in which you're not really familiar with. A lot of students see biological psychology and they get scared. They think, I'm not really good at biology. This isn't going to be good. But really, honestly, it's just breaking down how our body communicates with its various parts. Okay, so that all starts from the neuron. And so you're going to look at a neuron. What is it? What are its functions? And then its communication within the body or with other neurons happens via an action potential is where it all starts. And the neurotransmitters that get released during that, which is how, one system of your body, say your immune system, could communicate with your brain or could communicate with your endocrine system to go ahead and release a hormone. You get the point of that, but it's sort of the neurobiology of how our body works. And so it doesn't get too in detail as you would if you took physiological psychology, but it gives you the bases. And then you're going to go ahead and get into the brain, spend a good deal of time looking at the brain, looking at the different functions of the brain, looking at the entire nervous system. So we'll look at the somatic and autonomic, spending a little more time in the autonomic nervous system, in terms of gauging, how do hormones work? How do they interact with other parts of our body? And how does this, more importantly, affect behavior? Things like stress is impacted by our nervous system, and our brain growth and development, and our neurons, the plasticity of our neurons, how long-lasting are they, is all affected by communication within that system. You'll be introduced to some different techniques and how we currently are able to study the brain. These are important as you're reading through Hawk reading number 2 this week. Hawk reading number 2 deals with experience and how it affects our brain, and it was in fact the point of topic for this week's tweet. Getting you to think about how experience affects the brain before you've even read the Hawk study is the goal of the tweet. So I'm hoping that you're responding to that tweet before you've dove into the material for the week, because now you're going to really realize and understand just how experience affects the brain. You're going to look also at emotion, memory, learning, which we will spend some more time on. Later in the semester, we'll spend an entire chapter on emotion, on learning, and on memory. But here you're going to see what parts of the brain are responsible for those functions. So this is going to be stuff that you learn now, and you're going to kind of chug it in your memory banks for future weeks where we're getting much more in depth into these topics. And then again, just parts of the brain, understanding just the breakdown of, what parts of the brain are responsible for what functions. If you want to move your right arm, or you want to speak, or you want to, interpret what someone's saying, if you want to remember something long term, there's a part of the brain that's responsible for each one of those things. So there's a lot of figures in this book, a lot of diagrams that are going to help orient you to the brain and the body, a lot of labeling. This is one chapter that note cards would be super helpful in just all the definitions. Again, a lot of these terms are probably new to some of you. And so it's going to just take some time this week, spending a good deal of time familiarizing yourself with the language. And the best way to do that, I think, would be through note cards. Make those early on in the chapter as you're reading, and then keep them with you throughout the week so you can kind of be reviewing that material as you go. One really nice feature of the textbook and my psych lab is that there's an audio format for each chapter. So if you'd like to listen to the chapter, that's real helpful. A lot of times what students will do is they'll listen to the audio of the chapter first before they ever even take notes or anything, and then they'll read through it with the lecture slides right next to them. Kind of a more in-depth read where they're taking notes and highlighting and jotting things down. So see if that doesn't help this week with just getting through the material. Here are the lecture slides for you. And also, I know there's been a little bit of a delay and a couple people getting their books, some issues. So this will be the last week I do this, but I've posted a PDF of Chapter 2. So the biological psych chapter for you in case you fit into that category. I've also posted a PDF of the Hawk reading number 2. So again, that can get you started and into your work. You'll be watching videos this week. All the videos are in episode 3 in my psych lab. When you toggle over to the videos option, you'll click into episode 3 and there's some great videos in there, specifically talking about some neuroimaging techniques, talking about the nervous system, showing you some diagrams and breakdowns. I think also some simulation videos of how neurotransmission happens, so communication between neurons. So I think all of that will be super helpful as you're going through the chapter this week. And then, as I mentioned, this week's discussion is related to the Hawk reading, but again, you should be tying in readings in the main chapter. Okay, so when you're answering these 2 questions here, you want to tie in what you read in Hawk. You also want to tie in what you read in Chapter 2, all the biological stuff, in your main textbook, the Ciccarelli and White textbook. Okay. So you're going to be answering these 2 questions. You're going to be giving thorough answers that are backed by what you've been reading, and citations are important. Make sure you're citing where your ideas are coming from so that I know. And when I say citation, I don't mean a reference list at the end. I mean, as you say something, cite where it's coming from. So using author's last name and date of publication, right? Because we're doing APA citations. And if you need help with that, you can go back into the Start Here menu, and I've posted some various sources. Here, I'll click into here and get you oriented with where we're going to go. So if you come down to here to the cite as you write, that document's there to help you cite while you're writing. Like, I want to pull this from the textbook. How do I do that? Do I need quotes? How do I cite the author? In writing in any social science or for research purposes, you never want to use direct quotes. You always want to kind of read the information, synthesize it, put it into your own words, and then cite just where the idea came from. Okay, so that's what you should be doing as you're working on these discussion board posts. Once you've done that, then you're going to wait for all your peers to, chime in with their posts to these questions. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to reply to 3 people's posts, okay, their main posts. So everyone's going to say different things when it comes to answering these questions, and that's your chance to comment on what they're saying, okay, in a more in-depth fashion. So you want to try to avoid saying, oh, I agree with you, great post. That doesn't tell us anything. Add on to what they said. Did they miss something? Is there something else they could have said or thought about? Did what they say spur you into thinking something else? Let us know. Tell us that. Were there extra details or examples that they could have included? If so, go ahead and write that out. My goal is to get you your discussion feedback from week 2 by Monday. That way you can kind of see, what I do right, what did I do wrong, before you go into starting this week's discussion. So please make sure that you're looking for that feedback. It would be in the grade function. So if you go to My Grades, you would see, week 2 discussion. You click on it. You'll see your grade. If you actually click on the grade, like, I got a 10 out of 10, you'll see my feedback. You'll see some of my comments on your posts. But also, if you go back into the discussion for that week 2, and look at what I said, look at what other people said, that's going to be helpful for you, because I also will respond within the thread of the actual discussion. I'll make some comments, and those can be helpful for you. Okay. In addition to the discussion, you've got your regular quiz, which covers Chapter 1, Science of Psychology, and then you have an exam, and the exam covers Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Okay, so obviously you want to take the quiz first, kind of see how you do there, and then exam 1 is covering chapters 1 and 2. Okay, and all the info is there on the exam. It's multiple choice. Got 35 minutes. It's 30 questions. It's meant to be challenging, as online testing often is. But I would really highly recommend doing any of the practice tests in my psych lab first before you ever even go to here. Okay, those tests in my psych lab, they give you 1 for every chapter. Those will help you to see, am I on track? Am I getting this stuff? Am I lacking in a certain area? Is there something I'm just not understanding? And if you're having trouble, that would be a great time to email me and say, hey, I don't understand this, or can you explain this? That's where I can give you some more feedback and guidance to make sure that you're on the right track before you ever even take the quiz or take the exam. So that's pretty much it. I hope you guys have a great week. But again, I just want to reiterate, let me know if you have any questions about anything pertaining to the material or the formatting of the class, and I'd be glad to help you. All right, guys, have a great week.